Legend of Napoleon Bonaparte from Legend Diaries. Napoleon Bonaparte, also known as Napoleon I, was a French military leader and emperor who conquered much of Europe in the early 19th century. Born on the island of Corsica, Napoleon rapidly rose through the ranks of the military during the French Revolution of 1789 to 1799. After seizing political power in France in 1799, he crowned himself as emperor in 1804. Shrewd, ambitious, and a skilled military strategist, Napoleon successfully waged war against various coalitions of European nations and expanded his empire. However, after a disastrous French invasion of Russia in 1812, Napoleon abdicated the throne 2 years later and was exiled to the island of Elba. In 1815, he briefly returned to power in his 100 Days campaign. After a crushing defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, he abdicated once again and was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he died at the age of 51. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, in Ajaccio, on the Mediterranean island of Corsica. He was the second of 8 surviving children born to Carlo Bonaparte, a lawyer, and Letizia Romolino Bonaparte. Although his parents were members of the minor Corsican nobility, the family was not wealthy. The year before Napoleon's birth, France acquired Corsica from the city-state of Genoa, Italy. Napoleon later adopted a French spelling of his last name. As a boy, Napoleon attended school in mainland France, where he learned the French language, and went on to graduate from a French military academy in 1785. He then became a second lieutenant in an artillery regiment of the French army. The French Revolution began in 1789, and within 3 years revolutionaries had overthrown the monarchy and proclaimed a French republic. During the period of violence against enemies of the revolution, Napoleon was promoted to the rank of brigadier general in the army. In 1796, Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais, a stylish widow and 6 years his senior who had 2 teenage children. More than a decade later, in 1809, after Napoleon had no offspring of his own with Empress Josephine, he had their marriage annulled so he could find a new wife and produce an heir. In 1810, he wed Marie-Louise, the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. The following year, 1811, she gave birth to their son, Napoleon François-Joseph Charles Bonaparte, who became known as Napoleon II and was given the title, King of Rome. In addition to his son with Marie-Louise, Napoleon had several illegitimate children. Since 1792, France's revolutionary government had been engaged in military conflicts with various European nations. In 1796, Napoleon commanded a French army that defeated the larger armies of Austria, one of his country's primary rivals, in a series of battles in Italy. In 1797, France and Austria signed the treaty, resulting in territorial gains for the French. The following year, Napoleon proposed an invasion of Egypt in an effort to wipe out British trade routes with India. Napoleon's troops scored a victory against Egypt's military rulers, the Mamluks, at the Battle of the Pyramids in July 1798. In early 1799, Napoleon's army launched an invasion of Ottoman Empire-ruled Syria, which ended with a failed siege of Acre, located in modern-day Israel. That summer, with the political situation in France marked by uncertainty, the ever-ambitious and cunning Napoleon opted to abandon his army in Egypt and return to France. In November 1799, Napoleon was part of a group that successfully overthrew the French Directory, the five-person group that had governed France. The Directory was replaced with a three-member consulate, and Napoleon became first consul, making him France's leading political figure. In June 1800, at the Battle of Marengo, Napoleon's forces defeated one of France's perennial enemies, the Austrians, and drove them out of Italy. The victory helped cement Napoleon's power as first consul. In 1802, a constitutional amendment made Napoleon first consul for life. 2 years later, in 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of France in a lavish ceremony at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Napoleon worked to restore stability to post-revolutionary France. He centralized the government, instituted reforms in such areas as banking and education, supported science and the arts, and sought to improve relations between his regime and the Pope, who represented France's main religion, Catholicism, which had suffered during the Revolution. One of his most significant accomplishments was the Napoleonic Code, which streamlined the French legal system and continues to form the foundation of French civil law to this day. From 1803 to 1815, France was engaged in the Napoleonic Wars, a series of major conflicts with various coalitions of European nations. In October 1805, the British wiped out Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of Trafalgar. However, in December of that same year, Napoleon achieved what is considered to be one of his greatest victories at the Battle of Austerlitz, in which his army defeated the Austrians and Russians. The victory resulted in the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire and the creation of the Confederation of the Rhine. Napoleon influenced almost all countries of Europe by his war and political skills. During these years, Napoleon re-established a French aristocracy which was eliminated in the French Revolution, and began handing out titles of nobility to his loyal friends and family as his empire continued to expand across much of Western and Central continental Europe. In 1810, Russia withdrew from the continental system. In retaliation, Napoleon led a massive army into Russia in the summer of 1812. Rather than engaging the French in a full-scale battle, the Russians adopted a strategy of retreating whenever Napoleon's forces attempted to attack. As a result, Napoleon's troops trekked deeper into Russia despite being ill-prepared for an extended campaign. In September, both sides suffered heavy casualties in the indecisive Battle of Borodino. Napoleon's forces marched on to Moscow, only to discover almost the entire population evacuated. Retreating Russians set fires across the city in an effort to deprive enemy troops of supplies. After waiting a month for a surrender that never came, Napoleon, faced with the onset of the Russian winter, was forced to order his starving, exhausted army out of Moscow. During the disastrous retreat, his army suffered continual harassment from a suddenly aggressive and merciless Russian army. Of Napoleon's 600,000 troops who began the campaign, Only an estimated 100,000 made it out of Russia. Napoleon then retreated to France, and in March 1814 coalition forces of Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Sweden captured Paris. On April 6, 1814, Napoleon, then in his mid-40s, was exiled to Elba, a Mediterranean island off the coast of Italy. On February 26, 1815, after less than a year in exile, Napoleon escaped Elba and sailed to the French mainland with a group of more than 1,000 supporters. On March 20, he returned to Paris, where he was welcomed by cheering crowds. Upon Napoleon's return to France, a coalition of allies, the Austrians, British, Prussians, and Russians, who considered the French emperor an enemy, began to prepare for war. Napoleon raised a new army and planned to strike preemptively, defeating the Allied forces one by one before they could launch a united attack against him. However, on June 18, at the Battle of Waterloo near Brussels, the French were crushed by the British, with assistance from the Prussians. In October 1815, Napoleon was exiled to the remote, British-held island of St. Helena, in the South Atlantic Ocean. He died there on May 5, 1821, at age 51, said to be from stomach cancer. During his time in power, Napoleon often posed for paintings with his hand in his vest, leading to some speculation after his death that he had been plagued by stomach pain for years. Napoleon was buried on the island despite his request to be laid to rest on the banks of the Seine, among the French people whom he loved so much. In 1840, his remains were returned to France and entombed in a crypt at Les Invalides in Paris, where other French military leaders are interred. Thanks for watching guys, and see you in the next video.